おはようございます。こんばんは。私です。刺し子ライブやっていこうと思うんですけど、今日ちょっと英語中心になると思います。ご用意していただければと思います。This is Sashiko Live Streaming and I will mainly speak in English today. I will do the Sashiko stitching while I talk about Sashiko, and any request is appreciated. So if you have anything to ask, shout it out. Just a second, okay? I'm sorry, I don't have the thread. There we go. There we go. All right. Let's start. 今日は日本語でやる予定です。よろしくお願いします。日本語じゃない。英語でやる予定です。すみません。This is this Sashiko Live Streaming where I stitch Sashiko while talking about Sashiko. There's nothing fancy going on here. I will just stitch, and so therefore, instead of like watching it, if you could have some stitching or something to drink like this or whatever you have, and relax and watch it, that'd be great. Thank you. しのぶさんありがとうございます。Thank you しのぶさん。ちょっと待って。I gotta find where I stopped. Where did I stop last time? It's a big problem that I cannot find. Oh, there we go. I didn't bring any topics today, as always. And this live streaming on Instagram, I don't really bring any topics to talk about. And I can talk about pretty much anything, but not the technique, or I will not teach anything right now here on this live streaming because it's my time to enjoy stitching while talking about Sashiko. So, but I can navigate the questions to the answers, which I already have on my on the YouTube. So, either way. It's the weekend, finally, Friday. I hope everybody can rest a little bit, I guess. I mean, it's not really resting, but something about Friday night. I will talk a little bit about sort of how do we Japanese think or even view the cultural translation outside of Japan. I shared one story, not at one, and I've been sharing a lot of stories about cultural appropriation that I'm learning right now. It's really new to me. There's a reason that it's new to me is that it's not really common in Japan for the Japanese, as a Japanese, to even think about it. It became kind of like an issue, or I even realized the pain only because I moved to the US and I started being a part of America. And the question is very reasonable. Why didn't I really think about it? Why wasn't it so significant to me when I was in Japan? And I've been thinking about why. And there are many reasons why, I guess, but I would like to talk about why I was not aware of those issues, and how do we view that toward the other Japanese word or even Japanese concept. Can you hear me, by the way? You can hear me, right? I wasn't checking. Gosh, I'm getting old. Atsushi, my account was hacked and stolen. I know. I've seen that, Shelly. I received a DM from you and it was not yours, so I didn't even do anything, but I may have blocked your previous account. I probably didn't block it, but I did not do anything about it. I'm sorry for that. I'm really sorry. After this much thread, and in the timing of me using the new thread, I will talk about that. I think I really should make the video about it in a shorter, summarized version. So it's more like a draft brainstorming of my understanding why it is so insignificant in Japan to think about the cultural appropriation. It's really, we don't even have the word in Japanese, so it's kind of interesting to see that. Oops, just a second, I have to fix it. Sorry, I had a little bit of mistake. Not a mistake, I had a little bit of accident. The thread got tangled, so it happens. Okay. Sorry, it takes a little bit of time for me to get rhythm, both stitching and talking. And I realized that it's really based on the topic I'm going to talk about. So, the topic I am going to talk about now is why the Japanese people really do not speak up about the cultural appropriation issues? Well, since we really do not, we are the people, we are the one who is actually privileged for that matter. In Japan, we are kind of the dominant group, and for that, as long as one doesn't go outside of Japan, we really don't have to worry about it. We have to be careful to not to do it, but we don't have to be worrying about it. But once they or even I get out of the Japan, then we have to face that. And there are a lot of things to there are a lot of concepts to learn. There are a lot of concepts to learn about the cultural appropriation from the American-born Japanese people or the foreign-born Japanese people, which has both cultures as their identity. So here we go. I mean, nothing is going on, but the sushi. Do you know sushi, right? Sushi, osushi. You can pretty much get it anywhere in any towns in the US at this moment. When I was in the US for the first time in 2001 or 2, it was already available, but it was not available everywhere. Right now, any grocery store has this sushi section, I believe, and it became the word. I mean, sushi is now the sort of English word. Everybody understands what it is. However, the sushi we can enjoy in the US is not exactly equal to the Japanese sushi or the sushi you can eat in Japan. So it's kind of a completely different food. More like their American sushi or Western sushi is rooted in the Japanese sushi, I believe, but it transformed to something completely different. I'm not talking about which is better, because I like both. I would love to try the spider roll in Japan if I have to go back to Japan. But my point is that it became completely different. And some people say that American sushis are inspired by Japanese sushi, and that's very true. But at the same time, since they sometimes don't do any eating raw fish, I wonder what they're inspired by, like eating rice or eating... Because we do not eat sushi. Like, I don't think Japanese enjoy sushi as the healthy option. It is healthy in comparison to the burgers and fries, but I don't really know. It's not a healthy food in Japan. It's one great option. Many people love it, but the healthy is not the first word I would think when somebody talk about sushi. So the sushi in Japan is something different than the American sushi, and we are all okay about it. I don't think there are many people who are like advocating the cultural appropriation about sushi. And I am one of those who does not really, who even appreciate both culture for that. And I don't know any Japanese, like Japanese-born Japanese who worry about those cultural appropriation in sushi. The reason and problem is not a problem. I'm sorry. The reason we do not so much worrying about the difference or transforming of the sushi outside of Japan is that we do have the tradition already. There are so many sushi chefs in Japan who knows what is the sushi in Japan. They don't make spider roll or Godzilla rolls. They know what the sushi is, and many Japanese people know that the sushi's original form in Japan. So no matter what happens outside of the Japan, the culture of sushi will not be different. It's secured already because it's so popular in Japan already. Same as futon. Futon is the word that almost all Japanese, not almost, every single Japanese people know what futon is in Japan. But the picture they would have in Japanese, in Japan, for futon is probably, I would say 100% different from the one we think in the US. Futon is not the word for the sofa bed, which becomes the bed. In the Western culture, futon became the foldable bed, which can be the kind of like easy sofa. But that's not the word for. The futon is not the word for that in Japan. Futon is simply about the blanket. But not many Japanese people shout about the cultural appropriation there, or even cultural filtration or cultural. I mean, it's not a cultural issue at all, and I don't think it's a cultural issue neither. Because there are significant, strong understanding in Japan. And we know it, and I believe that the people who use the word futon for their business know it probably, that the word itself is very secured already. I cannot, talk on behalf of them, but it's not something we can change on purpose. No matter what the non-Japanese people think, or no matter how much they want to change the meaning of word of sushi or futon, they can't, because there are so many people, the Japanese people, who believes in those words sushi and futon. And I thought like that too, probably. I think I was thinking like that too when I was in Japan about Sashiko too. But when I came to the US, I started realizing that some people really do not care about the origin. And unfortunately, not all Japanese people know the word sashiko, because it's once, at least my sashiko, our sashiko has once been discontinued, and my family sort of revived it based on the documents and techniques wisdom in 1960-ish. So I don't think more than 10% of the Japanese people know about sashiko, which means very few percent of the Japanese people know what sashiko is. Therefore, it's a kind of a risky issues when one decided to not to listen to the voice from the original practice. I'm not saying the original sashiko stitching is the answer, or I'm not saying that the original is the only sashiko we should practice. I'm saying that by ignoring those voices, the word might become something else completely. And the worst case scenario is Japanese people importing the word sashiko without knowing their own culture. And it's not the Western people's fault, or that's nobody's responsibility but us as a Japanese people who practice sashiko to share those voices. And it's so just, I think it's really sad if the word becomes something completely different because of those ignorance. Ignorance on both sides, the one who practice it and the one who try to use it for the business purpose. So that's the reason. That's the main reason I keep speaking up what is sashiko and what is I mean, what is not Sashiko is what I'm trying to do, because defining one Sashiko can be a very big issues later on. But it can be very significant issues because it is not established. There are not that many people who can fight back to the big wave of changing it. Kimono is kind of in between for that, because we do not wear kimono today in Japan, casually or naturally, so it's not the majority who wear the kimono. If the majority of Japanese people wear kimono in their ordinary life, then I don't think we have to worry about the cultural appropriation so much. It's not appropriation, probably. It's more like cultural filtration, that something important in the culture might be repainted by somebody who does not belong to that culture. So it's kind of interesting to see that. I mean, probably from the Japanese people who do not speak English, or who have not lived outside of Japan, my word may be taken as overreacting. And also somebody who do not really see the difference between the culture, or who have never been to Japan might think that my word, like who do not know the difference between the Japanese culture and American culture, may think that my words are overreacting. So I have a potentially both sides thinking that I am overreacting. The Japanese will know that I was not overreacting when the words are completely taking over, and those who are trying to change it will never realize that, because that's their choice. And if we all decided to be okay with that, I'm not gonna fight back. But I think I want to. I want to leave the words. I want to leave the stories so that we can make a better judgment. If the majority decided to not take it, if they all decided to ignore it, that's their choice. But the voice will be there. And I hope that the decision would be fair in terms of privilege and the power. So that's the reason I'm sharing the Sashiko stories. It's not really the optimal choice for many reasons, because I make a lot of enemies. People don't like what I'm saying because it could sort of create the contradiction to what they have been saying. So for example, if some people are saying like Sashiko is the technique to mend, that's not wrong, but that's very insufficient. So let's see how it's going to be different. But all things I can do is to leave as many notes as possible, so we can choose. Right now in English, many people may think that they're choosing Sashiko, but in reality they're choosing the Sashiko somebody filtered for their purpose. So it's not really a choice, it's just following the trend. And of course we can call it culture, but it's kind of sad. It carries a lot of stories, and Sashiko is not just stitching, which is stitching, by the way. I'm stitching Sashiko, and the Sashiko is a form of stitching, so it is stitching, but it is more than that. And unfortunately, many culture forgot about it. I purely don't think that Sashiko is only Japanese culture. Sashiko is the Japanese word, therefore Sashiko belongs to Japanese. However, the practice itself existed everywhere in the world. With name, without name, I don't know, but in many places they decided to discontinue because we became so wealthy, and we should appreciate, we are very much grateful for that wealthiness. But it doesn't excuse us to ignore the people who try to do everything they can to become wealthier. So that's probably the reason I'm trying to do, to share as many stories as possible. And I am trying to sort of speak up about the cultural appropriation. But my message is very simple, that it's on YouTube. If you care about the stories behind the word, it's not the cultural appropriation. If they do not care, if they start saying whatever, then that's the issue. That's the kind of line that I draw. Of course, many people will disagree with me for that. But this definition or this line is based on my shallow and immature experience as the color of person, POP, PO, person of color, sorry, POC. So I may change my opinion, I may change my statement later on, but as of now, that's how I view that. And that's the explanation I have why the Japanese people really do not worry about the cultural change over the wording. They don't really worry about it. I was not worrying about it too. So I understand both sides of the feeling. So that leaves us, we have to define the things. In order to define the problem, we have to define the word. And I made a YouTube videos a few days ago about the definition of Sashiko and Boro. And to be honest, I really do not want to make that video because one of the biggest difference between the Japanese culture and American or US Western culture is about the definition. Western culture definition is very important because it brings the answer, correctness. Following the definition is very important because otherwise we cannot argue. In Japan, definitions are not so important because our goal is not to make what is the right and wrong. So ask some Japanese what is the definition of sushi. I don't think they can answer clearly, and they might answer, but the answer will not be the same. It's gonna vary from people to people. That's how kind of vague it is, and it's okay to be vague. that's good and bad at the same time. It can be bad. It's quite bad. So by me defining the word Sashiko and Boro, many people will misunderstand that that's the answer. That's why I always say that Sashiko is not, for example, mending techniques. Sashiko is not about making one perfect stitch. Boro is not a colorful patchwork or recycling the fabric. So by saying what is not, I'm trying to kind of navigate everybody to think more so they can find their own definition with reading stories or learning stories. But it is quite important to define the word. When we talk about it, in English, and I'm explaining that in English. So as the start, it's not the answer, it's more like the start point to get the answer with their own definition. I define the word sashiko and borrow. So if you're interested in that, it's really simple, and it's only a few minutes of video. So if you are interested, please watch that on YouTube. YouTube is Sashiko. Sashiko, ko is C-O, S-A-S-H-I-K-C-O, not the K. And there's a video about that. I don't think any book wrote about it, because even Wikipedia is kind of incorrect for that matter. I mean, Sashiko as the little stab is not wrong, but it's not correct either. It's not enough. Not all Japanese people will agree that it's a little stab. Somebody translated with a very good intention, yet it didn't include the whole picture because of either language issues or cultural understanding issues. Either way, I don't know, but it's not 100. I do feel something is missing. So yep, the definition might not be so important for you because your goal is to just enjoy stitching, but understanding the story is going to make your stitching much more interesting too. I mean, you chose Sashiko for some reasons. Motivation can be anything. You want to relax, you want to do something calming, relaxation, meditation, or you may have actual project that you want to work on, like denim or jacket, some mending issues, not issues, mending project. Or you may care about the sustainability, so you just decided to not to purchase or follow the fashions anymore, so you decided to kind of recycle the fabric, reuse the fabric. Everything is correct, everything is good, but none of those is the core of Sashiko. That's a very important part of the Sashiko, but it's not the Sashiko. So unfortunately, it's kind of difficult to explain that without English. I mean, without Japanese language. In Japanese, it's really easy to explain. That's why my post doesn't have that much Japanese. I'm trying to have an analogy to explain that, how easy, how simple it is, but it's not shallow. It's deeply related to the something we think it's originally. By the way, it's a completely different thing. The beauty of Sashiko we share is that we can make a lot of projects by talking like this. Think about it. I really want you to think about it. I am speaking my second language, talking about some very difficult cultural issues in comparison, something I have never read in the books. I'm collecting all the information I have learned and making a statement, and while stitching, right? So I have not at zero, but very, very, very few concentration on my stitching. Only things I can pay attention right now is to follow the line, so I'm not gonna make a mess. I can make at least some patterns, but I really 0% attention to the size of stitches. But it's even because I don't pay attention to that. I'm not worried about the evenness. That's why it becomes even. We cannot focus on one thing so long time. It's kind of a sad things about the current Sashiko. They teach to make even stitches, and therefore they cannot make even stitches. It's just so sad. Like, if I have to make even stitches one by one, I don't think I've been continuing Sashiko. I'm not that patient. And this might not be something you want to hear, but I cannot spend hours of time just stitching. Of course, I sometimes stitch without anything in this complete silence as the sort of like relaxing, and that's probably something what you do. But in most cases, I am either listening to the audiobooks, music, Netflix. I don't play the game anymore. I used to play those Final Fantasies with Sashiko. Like so from the beginning, it's even without the cultural perspective, even without the cultural stories, the Sashiko now we can find in English is a little bit insufficient because they focus on the result too much, and they're kind of making it more craft or art. But it can be art, but I don't think it's art. It's more like a practice. And by the way, I've talked this much, but you can hear me, right? No audio? If so, that's so shitty. No, I don't think so. I talked this much yet. No, please don't say that. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for the comments. I was a little bit worried about it. Phew. Now, then, that's good. I was mumbling for 40 minutes and then, it's scary to realize that. Sakura. So it's not that difficult to learn this, so the best way is Sakura, please. Sakura. The best way is to take the cap broke my microphone. What? So yeah, the easiest way, not easiest, the fastest way to learn this Sashiko running stitch is to take my classes if possible, because I will navigate you to go through everything you need. But sometimes it's, if you watch enough, of my stitching, I think one can learn that too. There are many people who are doing it, and I appreciate that. The only things I would ask is to kind of cite my name or the videos if you decided to share those things. It's not my property, but I would like to be able to share that more. Yep, there was the cat. There was the cat jumping on my microphone, so the microphone fell down. Sorry about that. So that's the summary of today's story. One is it's actually I wanted to share about the cultural, why the Japanese people don't worry about those cultural, the word transition in cultural perspective. Yeah, the cat loves Sashiko Thread, and if they play it, it's gonna be one expensive cotton ball. So I would not recommend it, but they like attention, and me talking to the camera or stitching itself is gonna, it looks like that I'm neglecting something for them. So that's why when they try, at least they give up later on, but they try to get my attention first. Oops, I'm getting sleepy a little bit. It's almost 11 o'clock in Eastern time. So I will finish after one more thread. If you have any request for me to talk about, I'm happy to talk about it while I'm stitching. Or if you're watching this as the archive on the YouTube, please leave the comment so I may be able to talk about it in the next live session. Not a session, live streaming. So, thank you. すごい、ありがとうございます。Thank you. すごい、何がすごかったですかね。This sigh is not the Sashiko stitching or Sashiko thing. It's just the English. I really need. Well, I'm doing my best. I mean, being the parents in the US itself requires me to really learn English, but at the same time, it's. I've been doing this today. It's not that easy. Is there a rule on crossing the lines? Nah. No rules. I mean, you can, of course, follow the rules, but I don't like the following rules. Since we use the both side as the finished side, if we follow the rules. So rules are made to make one side better. Better in terms of perfect, I guess. And there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with following those rules, but since I'm using this fabric both front and back or outside or inside as the showing side, focusing on the rule is gonna make those differences completely significant, and I do not prefer that. お邪魔してください。ありがとうございます。ようこそ。もう少しで終わっちゃうかもですけど。ちょっと待ってね。はあ。マジか。I learned 京縫い It's very difficult to stitch. 京縫い I don't know that word. 京縫い。I'm not familiar with that word. 京縫い。Why do we 京縫い京刺繍のことですよね、多分ね。やったことないな。I don't know who made a rule though. 日本刺繍なんですね。日本刺繍は憧れてますね。Sorry, I'm gonna speak a little bit in Japanese. Because I'm talking about the different stitching or sewing culture in Japan. 日本って3つってまとめちゃうのもすごく語弊があるというか乱暴だかなとは思うんですけど、日本刺繍と和裁と刺し子があるんですよね。でこれ何の違いかっていうと、日本刺繍刺し子じゃあ日本刺繍和裁刺し子で何が違うかって昔考えたことがあって、これ死の交渉ってあるじゃないですか。死の交渉、侍農民交渉って あれそのものがまず地位としてはおかしいんですけど、この江戸時代ってなんとなく分かれてて、貴族と言われる方々、貴族って言っちゃっていいのかな、貴族と言われる方々がいて、そこに、献上するものを作っていた方々がいて、それが貴族専用の職人さんがいたものが日本刺繍に発展していくんでしょうし、和裁っていうのはもう完全に仕立て屋さん町民のための商の方ですよね。商いの方で、それ以外のもう農民とか本当地位が低い方々の日本人の針仕事の総称が刺し子になっていったんちゃうかなと思うんですよね。だからあんまりそのルールとか揃えるっていうのは刺し子揃えた方が綺麗なんですけど、そんなにめちゃくちゃ重要視はされてなかったと思って、され出したのも最近。やっぱり日本の語の方が話は進むね。Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you understand Japanese. I sometimes Oopsie, sorry. Okay, I will translate. I'm sorry. I will translate that in English. So there are three types of. It is very rough and dangerous summarizing that there are three types of stitching in Japan, but let's say there are three types of stitching in Japan. One is the Japanese embroidery called Nihon Shishu, and the other thing is the wasai, which you may have heard of that. And I have YouTube videos explaining what is the difference between Sashiko and wasai. From the perspective of techniques. And the third one is Sashiko-ish, kind of Sashiko. And those they are among many categories. I think those three are the major distinguish we can make. あ、日本人だから大丈夫ですね。あ、よかった。すみません、なんか混乱して、パニックってました。英語上手だからパニックってました。そうですよね。英語だから英語で書いてくれてたんですよね。ありがとうございます。すみません。I sometimes wear kimono, then I wanted to stitch to my hand instead to learn. Thank you. I will explain that. So there are three categories of Japanese stitching: Japanese embroidery, Nihon Shishu, and Wasai, the kimono making, and then the Sashiko. Those are sort of divided by their class. Japanese. We had a class in Japan in Edo period. Samurai was the warriors, which is higher than the merchant or farmers or even crafters, artisans. The Nihon Shishu Japanese emperor is more for the aristocratic people, made by like certified craftsmen or artisans. And kimono wasai is more like the business or industry that they made a kimono so that they can sell it and they can wear that. It's urban culture. Sashiko is sort of everything else below that. They cannot buy kimono. They couldn't, of course, even see that Japanese embroidery, but they had to stitch. So they stitched. And of course, they had a name for that. But over time, they started kind of collaborate. Well, not over time. There was a big movement in the folk art, Mingei. They started calling the stitching Sashiko, and that's probably the time they combine everything into one word. But because of that, there are a lot of rules and there are a lot of rules and something to follow in the Japanese embroidery and wasai. But in Sashiko, it really depends on where you learn from. It's like the cooking for that matter. In order to serve for somebody, like in order to serve in the Michelin 3-star restaurant, you really have to learn the rules, recipes. Of course, you have to learn the recipes and how to use things and how to be accurate, even if you work for the local restaurant. But if you are learning cooking from your grandma to make a tomato sauce, there's not much recipe. You just follow what she's doing and make it. But those threes are not equally, but all of them are tasty. It's different, but all of them are good. And that's the kind of distinguish. So that's why I keep saying, please do not romanticize Sashiko. It's not that fancy. Like it's I don't want to. Many people felt embarrassment. They felt shame on it, and now that non-Japanese are sort of fascinated, like romanticizing it, even idealizing it. That's a little kind of creepy for that. So interesting to hear the background of some Japanese stitching. Well, this Japanese stitching culture is very much my personal opinion. It's not even insight or feedback or stories. It's opinion. I can talk about Sashiko, but I cannot talk on behalf of the Japanese embroidery, Nihon Shishu or Wasai. But my honest feeling might explain. I wish to learn that. I have a strong longing to be like them. I may try it, but I didn't have opportunity to do that. But if I had a choice in my childhood which way I wanted to go, I wouldn't choose Sashiko for that. Well, I did not have a choice. That's why I am stuck here. But is it just learning from experience? Yes and no. The question is it learning from experience? Yes and no. But learning from almost 60 artisans judging me and criticizing me and laughing me since the childhood. So it's really it's a really good environment to learn. But I never had any I never had any curriculums to learn Sashiko, or I have never had any organized class. But I was with Sashiko for like 30 years without every single day. So that's life. You must have studied not only Sashiko, but historical things. Now the question is, yeah. So I hated Sashiko a lot throughout my childhood until pretty recently. I hated Sashiko from my heart. But I had to do it because that was my family things. You have to, like, if you have to do it, but if you hate it so much, what you can do is to learn why you hate it so much. In order to hate so continuously and consistently, you have to know the enemy. So yes, I read a lot of books about it goes back to the Japanese like a myth, 日本神話とか古事記. So I really wanted to know why Sashiko is here today. It could be gone by now, like the other culture. This stitching culture existed everywhere in the world. It should exist everywhere in the world. But for some reason, there are there are two words that it's famous for this kind of stitching. One is kanta in India and sashiko in Japan. I just wonder why we have that here. I mean, of course, in my childhood, I was thinking about how to not to do it with a lot of excuse. I was studying, I was learning how to, like, I needed excuse to say it's not gonna work. So leave me alone and release me from that cage. And of course, that's the reason, I came to the US to evacuate from that cage. It's interesting, yeah. I learned a lot of stories, and I had to listen to those stories too while I was there. Since as much as I'm talking like this while stitching, the Japanese artisans I grew up with kept talking while stitching. They never stopped talking. Their hands are busy moving because they have to make they are making sashiko stitching. At the same time, their mouths are free. They did not have Netflix, they did not have a smartphone, they did not have TV in front of them in the workplace, of course. As the result, only things they could do was to talk. So that was something. But you finally came back. Yeah, that's a long story, but I think I may have not shared that on Instagram, but I've been telling to the other people, and you probably will have that opportunity somewhere. But yeah, it's a long story, but there was the year that I completely changed my mindset. So yeah, I came back. But it's really recent, like the time I kind of shifted my paradigm is in 2011. And 2013, I started kind of realizing what I can do. And by 2015, I started really enjoying stitching. So that's just 6 years ago. Oops. Somebody might get disappointed, but only 6 years since I started really enjoying Sashiko. But I could do Sashiko because of my childhood. It's like asking the other people, how can you ride a bicycle? Well, because I practiced that when I was a child. So that's how ordinary it is for me to do Sashiko stitching. Riding a bike, driving a car, cooking, what else? Swimming. It's great that you can do it, and there are people who cannot do it. That's perfectly fine. But at the same time, it's kind of difficult to explain why you can do it. The answer will be, well, because I practiced in the past. So, I mean, it's an honor. It's an honor that many people take this Sashiko seriously and then fantasize it, romanticize it. Great, but don't change the origin. And one voice is not gonna change the origin. Your voice is not gonna change the origin. But those people who have power enough to influence the others, like the publishers, I don't like the word influencer, but there are many people who have customers already or audience already from something else. They are powerful enough to change the trend. There are a lot of people like that, and then if they are inside of that, well, I think they will move on. When the Sashiko's trend is over, they will probably move on to something else. But while they're on the Sashiko, they may change something really important. And that might be too late. Many people say it's too late for me to speak up, but I agree with them that it is too late to speak up without worrying about pain. But as long as I understand the risk of being in the pain, I don't think it's not too late. Well, I mean, even if it's too late, it's okay to speak up. So as long as there is a person who wants to listen to what I'm saying, I will keep sharing. But in the main big stream of Sashiko, I'm a little stone to block the flow. But that's all the things I can do now. God, I was gonna finish it a long time ago, but thank you so much for requesting the topic or comments. I talk based on the comments mostly, and your comment is very much appreciated. Again, if you're watching this as the YouTube as the archive, please leave the comment if you have any questions. Not a question. If you have any requests to talk in topics, and I will come back on the Instagram Live whenever I can. Usually it's gonna be the weekend because weekdays I'm a little bit overwhelmed with parenting. It's simple, it's parenting that it's overwhelming. But I will do the next live streaming in Japanese, and probably after that in English. But here and there, if you need any tutorials, information, stories, more, this is me, mumbling without any topics in my completely burned brain. Yeah, it's night, so. But if you wanna understand the message of Sashiko and techniques, please check the YouTube. It's the YouTube, and if you search Sashiko story, you should see my back picture. I don't remember the icon, but you'll find something like me doing that. And yeah, the pattern I'm working on is Asanoha. This is the finished version. It's gonna be like this in a moment. A few more hours. Did I say everything? I think I said everything. Alright, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you sometimes next time. ありがとうございました。ほぼ日本語なしですけれども、ちょっとだけでも和裁と日本刺繍のお話ができたのは良かったかなと思っています。ありがとうございました。良い週末を最後に噛んだ。今日噛まなかったのにな。良い週末をお迎えください。Good night. Have a good weekend. Bye bye. 切れてない。最後に噛んだよね。これ切れてないよね。あ、ちょっと待ってね。クローズボタンがないんですけど。